Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us and for being interested in learning about Mexico's business opportunities for the aerospace industry. What we're going to be talking today is actually a roadmap as to how to come to Mexico, how to evaluate business opportunities, and then how to see if it makes sense for you. So, thank you for joining us. My name is Xavier Hurtado, and I'm the director of the National Supply Chain Development Program for the aerospace industry in Mexico. So, moving along, this is the contents that we're going to be covering. We're going to be talking about our federation, what association we represent. Then we're going to be talking about the forecast, which is the expectation of assembly and delivery of different aircraft for this decade. Then, what is our value proposition for buyer companies? And this is going to be very important because the demand that we get, which are going to become your business opportunities, come from this buyer company. So obviously, we need to deliver a value proposition to them, which is how we get to know about those business opportunities. And then we'll discuss about this not only business opportunities, but also the avenues that are going to be increasing business opportunities on this side of the planet. And then we're going to go into the near reality, which is after COVID-19, what's happening. And most especially, I'm going to say the forecast that we have, especially because manufacturing is going to relocate this decade. And we need to be very aware of what opportunities that's going to bring for us. The next part, we're going to be talking about the roadmap for foreign companies to start or expand business with Mexico. So we're going to be offering or talking about different business models that you could use over here. And then what are the key questions that you will need to answer to buyers once you meet them? Because this obviously will mean how ready you are for that conversation. And then get a tailored roadmap to do business in Mexico, which is how we, from the Mexican Federation of the Aerospace Industry, might be helping you. So let's move along about our association. We were founded as a private nonprofit association in 2007. And I'm going to say that this federation was founded by the large companies, the big OEMs and tiers one that wanted to have a voice as a private counterpart for the federal government in Mexico. What that means is that the reason this federation was founded is because whenever there was some policy making in regards to the aerospace industry, the aerospace key players decided that the government could not decide what was best for the industry, and therefore they got together and integrated this federation. We're talking about companies like Bombardier. We're talking about General Aviation. General Electric Aviation. We're talking about Safran, about UTAS. So all these big companies got together and they founded this. 14 years later, we are more than 120 members. And we can estimate that out of the exports of the aerospace exports of the country, we export around 80% of them in our membership. So that's a type of networking that we have within the federation. We have collaboration with different associations. Most of them are like the FEMIAs of other countries. So with the aerospace associations of other countries, we do like bilateral missions, and that's how we connect our companies. This is just a sample of the different members that we have. You can see the big OEMs like Boeing, Airbus, Bombardier, Textron Aviation, Gulfstream. You have tiers one like Safran, Honeywell, Utah as well. Now it's Collins Aerospace, Tails, and so on. And then all the way down to the value chain to tiers 3, 4, including heat treatment, chemical treatment, obviously manufacturing processes like castings, forgings, sheet metal, CNC machining, plastic injection molding, and so on. So this is just some of the members that are in our association. Now, talking about the forecast that I initially said, this is a very recent study because obviously after COVID-19, there was a worriness about what was going to happen in the aerospace industry. So over here, as you can see, the first chart in the left top corner, what we can see is the projection towards 2031. And as you can see, it's different types of aircraft and the demand, and demand is going up. Demand is not projected to go down. If we go to the one on the right, what we can see is what forecast we have for each specific type of aircraft on the commercial side. And then in the lower part on the left side, we have the recovery expectation for each one of the types of aircraft. So if you see, even though in some value chains, the recovery is kind of slow, anyways, this is going to get better. So that's a forecast. And then in regards to the MRO, this is also a very interesting market. What you can see on the left, top left, is what happened in 2020, where most of the airlines had to ground their aircraft and park them in some airports. And then what you see on the right is actually types of aircraft that were parked. So right now, the expectation is that as vaccines keep on moving forward, as the population gets vaccinated, the expectation to fly again is going to go up. And therefore, all of those aircraft that were parked for more than a year will have to go into an MRO to see if their airworthiness is ready to actually fly. And as you can see, there's the effect of the pandemic. Not only did it park different aircraft, but also the aircraft that were like the oldest models, they are going to be changed into cargo aircraft, which brings another business model over here. So what you're seeing over here, it's an increasing demand of the MRO services as well. So on the assembly part that we had in the previous slide, and this one, we can see definitely that there's going to be room for growth. Now, well, as I said before, most of the demand that we get comes from buyer companies, which are OEMs and tiers one, not only in Mexico, but also from the US and Europe. And what this buyer companies are trying to do is they're trying to regionalize value chains, and obviously to see how to improve or how to reduce costs and how to reduce lead times. So our value proposition, number one, we say to the buyers, we'll help you, number one, find suppliers in and out of Mexico. And what we could do is also to pre-audit them. So we say, we'll help you find and get connected with qualified buyers in and out of Mexico. We can provide you access to our national inventory of aerospace capabilities. Right now, we have more than 400 suppliers mapped in more than 20 states in Mexico. So what this means is that we can accelerate the process of getting connected with qualified suppliers. Or if they're looking for a capability that we don't have in the country, we can say, you know what, it's not here, and we can try to look for that capability in a different country. We can pre-audit suppliers, and this is very interesting. Back in 2016, when we started the program, we got trained by different buyer structures, and they helped us understand how it is that they evaluate suppliers in order to incorporate them in their value chain. And this became an instrument that we have in which we evaluate 7 areas, which we're going to cover later, and 5 levels of maturity. So whenever we connect a buyer with a supplier, we already know, or we already should know, what the readiness level is in those 7 areas, and so that we can develop or put together a development plan. And once we have a letter of intent from buyer and a development plan tailored to develop the supplier according to the needs of the buyer, we can go to the government and negotiate for government incentives, which is something we have done very successfully. For example, there's been some gaps in regards to certification, or in regards to training, or in regards to accessing financing to acquire machinery and equipment, and we've been able to gain those incentives to accelerate these companies. Then also we help buyers to organize Supplier Days. And these events, actually, we're going to cover them later, but basically what we do is that we bring suppliers to learn about the requirements of buyers, terms and conditions, rules of engagement. And then afterwards, once the supplier understands what they need to do, then they can get back to the buyer and say, I want a B2B meeting. And obviously, it's going to be a more straightforward meeting that could bring business on board for both of you. Then there are some times in which we need to integrate procurement pools, and this we do it because sometimes the RFQ or the purchase order that a buyer can assign you. Let's suppose that you will need to expand an operation or to expand a production line or even to acquire a machine. And sometimes they give you a business case that it's just, I don't know, 25% of the cost of the machine. So it doesn't make sense. But what we do is that we can integrate more buyers so that we justify and bring together the demand so that you can invest in that capability without having the risk of not recovering the money. So that's something that we can help as well. And we offer to buyers as well. Then we offer in some cases to run RFQs and RFPs. What has been very interesting is that there's a lot of suppliers that turn out to be very expensive. The perspective or the perception, let's say, from the buyer, usually they say suppliers want to become millionaires in the first contract, which is not true. Once we've opened quotations, and we are able to open quotations to open books because we have no conflicts of interest. I mean, we put no markups to the connections that we make. So when we open books, that's when we can learn if they are paying for raw materials in an expensive way. And we have found in some cases that they're paying up to 7 times as much as a tier one. So if you're buying raw materials in a very expensive way, you're already out of the equation, and it's not your process, it's not your greediness. So that's something important. Then the second part, where we can put the development plans in place, is whenever the cycle times happen to be slow, or the third part, whenever the secondary processing side of the equation is not in place, like chemical treatment, heat treatment, welding, you name it. So that's when we open books, we learn what the gaps are, and that's how we can develop some acceleration for the suppliers. Then we've also had to go into the supply chain financing and factoring. This especially because we have some buyers that have very long payment terms. There's, for example, a couple of buyers that they start at 120 days of payment term. Perhaps they could go up to 180 days. So obviously, most of the suppliers that we talk to, they can offer 30 days of credit, which means they're not ready for the conversation. So what we do is that before we introduce them to the buyer, we can connect them to a financing institution that can support up to 210 days in a competitive way. And then when you quote for the buyer, if they ask you for 180 days, you say yes, and obviously you add just the interest rate of the financial institution. But that means that you're ready for this conversation now. So we've had to connect with financial institutions to support our value chains. And then the last one, we say we're going to help with production relocation, whether that is from one buyer to a supplier or from one supplier to another. And this happens, this decade actually is going to happen a lot more. And why is it going to happen a lot more? In the US alone, in the United States, 50 million baby boomers are going to be retiring during this decade. And what that means, if we go to the manufacturing shop floors, around 53% of the labor force, technicians and engineers, are 55 years or above. What that means is that they're going to retire this decade, and then there's no replacement for the manufacturing industry in the United States. Same thing happens in Canada. Same thing happens in Europe. So what's going to happen is that manufacturing in those countries is going to relocate, and what we could do is we can help the buyers find the adequate suppliers to absorb this demand. And it is happening. I mean, it has been happening already, but this decade is going to accelerate. So we're going to be helping a lot in this regards. So once we put in this value proposition for different buyers, as I said before, you can see over here the inventory of the national inventory of aerospace capabilities. And if you see in the bottom, there's a story in which we were able to connect a buyer with 3 different suppliers. But this is very important because this buyer came from the United Kingdom. He approached the government, and the databases that usually governments have, they just have like the nature of the business, but then they don't have any depth. What I mean by this is They don't know anything about the size of the machines. They don't know anything about the certifications or about the types of raw materials they work with or about the vertical integration that they have. So when this buyer came to Mexico, that they gave him a database of more than 320 suppliers all throughout the country, and that they referred them to us, and then we said, let's sign an NDA, an undisclosure agreement, provide us with specifications so that we can understand what it is that you're looking for. And then we browsed through our database in which we already have vetted suppliers, and we were able to suggest 20, out of which this buyer said, I'm going to go for the top 5. He visited the top 5 and he awarded $14 million to 3 of them with 60% in savings. This happened in less than 6 months. Now, this is important. Usually in B2B, business to business, this type of contracts might take 12 to 18, perhaps 24 months. In some cases, we've seen even up to 36 months to engage in a contract. So when we say that it happened in 6 months, the level of readiness from the suppliers and the level of urgency of this buyer were right in a midpoint. So when can something happen that fast? That's whenever these two sides of the equation happen. Like when the buyer is in an urgency to allocate something, and suppliers are ready to have that conversation, that they're ready with certifications, they're ready with KPIs, they're ready with cost competitiveness, and so on. So what we do over here, that the upper part is, whenever we say we can connect those value chains, we have the blue square, and everything that we have in the blue square happens to be the buyer side, which is different segments: commercial, business aviation, civil aviation, defense, light aircraft, drones, satellites. It's either the assembly or the MRO, or even ground support, where airports and infrastructure come on board. Then we have the tiers 1, which come for us, it's 8 main different applications: interiors, engines, landing gear, and so on. And then all of these buyers go and try to find suppliers in the capabilities that we have on the green square. On the green square, we have like the tiers 2, and we have 9 types of capabilities that they're seeking, mainly composites, electrical and electronics, sheet metal, forgings, castings, plastic injection molding, machining, textile, leather, and foam products. And obviously, we have secondary processing that are tied to these processes, especially the metal side. So we need to understand where they are. You're seeing 2 types of number. For every capability, you see a number on the left, and then a line, and then a number on the right. What that means is that the number on the left is the AES 9100 certified companies versus the ones that are not certified but are either already serving the aerospace industry or intending to serve the aerospace industry. So this is how we connect buyers and suppliers. And obviously, what we are trying to do is to extend our database to different countries where you have higher levels of complexity, certification, and competitiveness, so that we can bring you in this database and connect you really fast. So let's move along. This is important because this is where the opportunities are. As you can see on the screen, we're already working with 55 buyer companies. All of those companies have asked us to look for different capabilities. As you can see on the screen, we have castings that it was originally $280 million a year. And actually, the pain point went up to $1,500 million a year. Obviously, this isn't separated in 5 different buyers. This is not just one. Machining, we have actually right now $72 million in procurement, which was 62 plus 9, but they also added one more just recently. On the sheet metal side, we have 70 plus 50. So what we're trying to say is, all of these opportunities we're trying to locate. And if you see on the white square, that's what we have done, where it took us 3 years to actually connect 23 suppliers. It was a really good success story because we had over 1,500 part numbers and more than $37 million. But it took us 3 years to get there. During 2020, the forecast was to reach 40 suppliers, more than 4,000 part numbers, and more than $100 million. But then COVID-19 came along. There were a lot of projects that were put on hold. And right now, we're expecting a recovery between 15 to 30% for the next 18 months. So what buyers are asking us to do is to go back to the full database, to the full supply base that we have, and ask them about the financial stability, the current status, like how much muscle did they lose with the COVID-19, and how ready they could be to ramp up, and how much time will it take them to go from 15 to 30% increase. So this is really interesting right now. Now, what are the avenues that we have for growth? Excuse me. We see four different avenues. Number one, the USMCA, which was formerly NAFTA, got re-signed, got renegotiated, and in some industries like the automotive, the domestic or regional content got increased from 62.5 to 75%. What that means is that more than $30 billion will have to be import substitution. What that means is that if some of our buyers were buying in Europe or in Asia, they will need to either relocate the supplier from Asia or from Europe into North America, or to substitute the supplier. If that's your case, I think you ought to do something, because otherwise you're going to be losing these contracts. Then COVID-19 was very hectic for a lot of buyers. There were a lot of buyers that were heavily trusting China. And when China got shut down in February 2020, a lot of them, they had real trouble with their value chains, with their inventories. And they were contacting us, and they were regretting not having a dual source developed in this country. So what they're trying to do right now is they're trying to develop this dual source, and they're going to try to regionalize their supply chain. So I still recall one conversation with a different government. They said, if you want to deliver in North America, you need to be in Mexico. If you want to deliver in Europe, you need to be in East Europe or North Africa. Or if you want to deliver in Asia, you need to be somewhere in Southeast Asia. So if we follow that regional conversation right now, there's a lot of buyers that are going to try to regionalize value chains, and that's going to bring some opportunities also on this side of the continent. And then the lack of human capital. This is very important, because aside the USMCA and aside the relocation that we have because of COVID-19, last year, January 2020, there were missing more than 500,000 technicians and engineers in the US alone. So it's a huge gap, but then that's not the big problem. The big problem is that 53% of technicians and engineers were 55 years old with a retirement age of 65. So what does that mean? They're retiring this decade. There's no replacement. What's even worse is this decade, 50 million baby boomers will retire, out of which 12.5 million of them happen to be business owners. So what's going to happen is that the expectation is that around 80% of those companies just shut down their operations and go to sleep. And that's going to be a big impact into the manufacturing industry. I'm not saying only aerospace is going to hit the whole manufacturing industry. So this means very good opportunities. And once again, the one that we see in yellow, which is the recovery of the industry, which is expected to grow between 15 to 30% over the next 18 months. So all of this, once again, brings very good opportunities on this side of the planet. Now, let's see what the problem is over here. And this is important. It's good to learn from your mistakes, but it's better to learn from other people's mistakes. So, and I want you to see the message that we have on the screen. The most common mistake for foreign companies whenever they try to come to Mexico is they're not prepared for the conversation. Usually when we introduce them, one of the key questions, once a buyer likes the capabilities that you have and the complexity level that you can handle, they're going to ask you, when are you going to be in Mexico? And most of the foreign companies, whenever they come, they're not ready to respond for this. They want to sell from their countries of origin, which is not bad, and that could be the starting point. But if you have no plan to come and even numbers to study the equation, that they're trying to regionalize. I mean, put yourself in the place of the buyer. The buyer wants to reduce cost and lead times. So if you are somewhere in Mexico as a buyer, the least thing that you want is to be importing from the other side of the world. What you want to do is you want to have your supplier preferably across the street. So obviously they want to be sure that you're going to be here. And if you're not ready for that conversation, they're just going to discard you. So I'm not saying that you should speculate and you should establish an operation over here. It has to make sense. We understand. And perhaps it could be through phases. Phase one, you start with sales. And once you go to a certain level, you say, perhaps I go to a distribution center, but I still manufacture in Asia or in Europe, wherever you are. And perhaps once you reach another level of demand, then you open a manufacturing facility. That could be the case, but you need to be, once again, ready to answer this conversation. The goal, as you see on this map, is regional value chains. And that's what's going to happen over this decade, especially with COVID-19. And right now we're in 2021 and we still have problems across the board. The logistics has gone crazy. Every week we have an increase in cost, and then we cannot predict easily when we're going to have our inventories. So what buyers are going to have to do is they're going to have to relocate and regionalize their value chains so that they're not dependent on logistics. So whenever you want to come to Mexico, whether it is to seek for clients, business opportunities, or actually to establish your operations, it's important to understand, if you see in the background, we have like 3 different maps of Mexico, and the landscape is going to be very different. Most of our suppliers serve different industries. That they go for aerospace, automotive, medical devices, oil and gas, I don't know. So every region has different composition. And what we can say, it's more than 20 states, more than 28 industrial cities, more than 10,000 operations. So there's a lot of companies that whenever they want to come to Mexico, they just read whatever availability of information they have on the web. And not necessarily does that mean that that location might be the best opportunity for them. So what we suggest we do is know before you go, know before you come to Mexico. And it's important to understand what's important for you. And based on your information, how can we help you find the right location? So how do we do that? These are 4 stages that we might help you to understand and to actually take off your project to Mexico. Number 1, we need to understand what your company capabilities are. So we need to integrate your full profile, and we'll see what that is right now. Then we need to integrate your business expansion plan. We need to understand numbers and especially dates. When do you plan to have which numbers? And then based on that, we'll put together a promotion and connection plan where we'll start doing B2Bs, commercial missions, and so on. And then if you need to establish an operation, we can help you with that as well. There's a lot of things that we do for foreign companies that don't have a cost, except obviously for the travel fare and all of those things. But we'll go over it. So the first thing to integrate your profile is, let's understand your place in the value chain. What capability do you have? Are you in the castings business? Are you in the machining business? Do you work preferably with engines, landing gear, interiors, cabins, ground support? Do you prefer to serve the assembly of aircraft, or preferably MRO operations? So we need to understand all of this before we trigger a plan, so that we say, okay, based on your capabilities and the type of market that you're trying to serve, let's outline the best cost-effective plan for you. So what do we need to understand? These are 15 areas, and obviously you're going to have access to this presentation. These are 15 elements that we need to understand about your company to see how ready you are to engage with buyers. All of this, obviously, once you send us your sales presentation, we'll send you a link where you can answer certain questions. And between the questionnaire that we send plus the sales presentation that you give us, we are able to understand what are the gaps in the 7 different areas that we have on the left. which is how ready you are for to engage with business on the commercial side, on the financial side, technical side, which includes certifications, KPIs, your size constraint, machines, and so on, regulatory and foreign trade certifications, legally, the technology that you have. This also goes to the software side of the equation, and also the innovation side. If you have any patents and R&D, and this decade is going to be also very interesting, especially this last line, because most OEMs are saying towards the next years we need to have better aircraft, and what that means is they need to be lighter. So all the metal parts need to weigh less, which brings a great deal of opportunities for additive manufacturing and composites, or light metals. And then the other part is that they need to be more fuel efficient. So there's a big deal of opportunity that was not there before, and that we are able to bring in. So these 15 elements are for us very important to understand the gaps. And if you're not ready, so that we discuss how to bridge that gap before you even talk to the buyer, because otherwise they're going to discard you from their database. Then let's integrate your business plan. And to do this, there are 3 stages that we follow. Number 1, we need to understand the reasons. Why do you want to expand business? Do you want to get close to your clients? Or do you want to conquer new clients? Or do you want to lower the cost to get close to your clients? So number 1, we understand the reasons why you want to come, and we try to put some numbers to it. Then number 2, we understand your stage. What stage are you are? Is it the first time that you think about coming to Mexico? Or you're evaluating the region? You thought about it before, but you're now evaluating because perhaps a client asked you to, or you've already came, but right now it's going to be the first time that you're going to be connected with buyers, or you're already selling in the region. Perhaps you already have a sales force, or perhaps you even have a manufacturing facility in the region and you want to expand it. So we need to understand, number 1, reasons, number 2, the stage where you're at, and then based on this, what are the the models that you're going to be using? How do we select the business model that makes a better fit for you? That's depending on how we answer the 4 questions that we have on the right. Where are you going to sell an invoice from? Number 1. Number 2, where are you going to manufacture or process from? Number 3, where are you going to deliver from? And obviously this implies different things. And if you have different project phases, and what we could help you do is we could run a cost model that we can where we can plug in some numbers, and based on that, we will be able to determine the best cost model. And if you need to come, which regions you should be coming to. Then on the business connection side, we talked about the supplier days before. These are some of the key buyers that we have on the screen, and we've already arranged that we're going to have discussions with them as to what segments and programs they work with, what's their forecast, what applications and complexity of part do they manufacture, what are their requirements, and especially what the long-term agreement expiration dates are. And this is important because whenever there's an expiration date coming up, you might raise your hand and say, I can quote for this part. What is the minimum supplier profile that they're expecting in regards to sales, certifications, and so on? And then what are the terms and conditions, payment terms, liabilities, and so on. Then what is the process to become a supplier, and then how you can get developed. So all of the supplier days, we have different dates. Some of them are going to be virtual, some of them are going to be in person. So depending on the plan that we trigger for you, we might say you should be here in certain dates, or perhaps even attend virtually, or let's see how we can deploy it. And what you can see in the white squares on the right, it's the different types of messages, requirements, and even specifications of the profile that they're requiring. This is just an example. This was a plant from Canada that we assisted in landing in Mexico. Originally, this plant decided to be in Querétaro, which is central Mexico. And that was because one of them had lived there for about 3 years. This Canadian lived there for about 3 years. Whenever we understood the process that they had, we said, you'd better be up north But obviously we organized agendas visiting different regions, and they got established in 2020 in Chihuahua. And this is what these are ways in which we can help. And one of the things that make us very transparent, we have no bias or prejudice as to which region you should go to, or and most importantly, we don't charge anything to do this site selection to help you land your operation. Au contraire, I'm going to say we help you find government incentives in the different locations that you are planning to expand your business. So how can we help you? These are the different things that we do for foreign companies. Number one, we understand your objectives. Number two, we help you determine the business model. Number three, we help you promote your capabilities, and then to integrate your business connection and expansion plan, to understand your readiness level. And then there's been some foreign companies that say, I want to evaluate if there's a good market size for me, so we can do market entry studies. If you want to do a joint venture with someone in Mexico, we can help you find the right partner. Then we can help you find the right location for your operation, organize agendas, visit different buyers, suppliers, or even self-landing operators. Put a self-landing plan if you desire to expand your operation, negotiate for government incentives, and even finding financing for your operation. So if you plan to expand operations into North America, I would say get assistance from us today. I mean, this has no cost. What do we make out of it? Basically, when we strengthen the value chain, and more operations happen to be here, usually there's a lot of them that turn out to be our members later on. That's how we grow. That's why we don't charge any additional fees for what we do. So what I suggest you do is send us your profile presentation or sales presentation, request the link to fill out the questionnaire, and then let's put a strategy session together, a discussion, so that we can put together that roadmap that would be the best ways the best ways to go. Most of the costs, as I say, we charge nothing for it. But obviously, if travel expenses are required, then obviously those things are not included. So thank you for spending this time with me, for listening to my value proposition for you, and send your presentation, please, to that email, suppliers@femia.com.mx, or you have the phone number also on the screen. Thank you so much. And should you have any questions, please feel free to send us an email, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much, and have a great day.